everyone was the same, my friends, I think you'll agree with me when I say that life would be very boring.
Meet Ramona Wink. Ramona is a licensed therapist, helping people through their problems. She also runs a business owner-focused small group therapy and coaching program, giving business owners a safe place to discuss their issues and overcome them together. Hear her really unique path as a banker, a pastor, a therapist, and a small business owner. Hear how she followed her heart, divorcing her husband and marrying her now wife, Sue, facing backlash from peers and social groups.
Love will always win. The hate is super loud. But again, I go back to politicians aren't going to save us. You and I are going to save each other.
We talk on all things leading with love, empathy, managing emotions in the workplace, handling the polarizing political and social climate these days, and much more. I think you're going to love this conversation. I cannot wait to jump in right now. Let's go. What's going on, everybody? My name is Ryan Snod. It rhymes with odd, and you're watching and listening to the Rhymes with Odd podcast, the weekly show for business and personal development here in the state of Iowa. Today, I'm joined with another amazing guest. We got Ramona Wink in the house. Ramona, welcome.
Hello, Ryan. It's so good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Excited to connect.
Yeah.
It's been, we were trying to recount here, a couple years since we've seen each other, so it's always fun to have a little bit to sit down and connect with you and hear what's going on in your world. So.
Here we are. Yeah, I was speaking for the Iowa Employment Conference, and I hired you to be my videographer, so that's great. So I'm so proud of you for doing this work. It's important.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and we were just saying, too, it's I feel like people crave this long-form medium, and people want to go deep on certain topics, and especially with today's talk, we'll kind of talk through your career path, but also leading a business with empathy, the mental side of it, the personal development side of it. There's big challenges when you deal with people, which you talk to any large company CEO, they'll say managing people is probably the hardest thing. So.
Absolutely. So I like to think of myself as a people expert and helping other leaders really figure out that piece, because the people they're the biggest asset, and yet as people we can be complex human beings, right? And it's hard to know how to manage these people, right? So I think that that's my superpower, and so I'm excited to share some wisdom with your listeners today.
Sure. Well, I guess a good place to probably start would be if you could just give people the 10,000-foot view elevator pitch of who you are, what you do.
Absolutely.
I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. So I am a mental health therapist with 515 Therapy and Consulting in West Des Moines, and that is a large private group practice. We have about 30 clinicians, Ryan, and so we see as young as 3 years old, all through the lifespan. And I always tell people 515 Therapy and Consulting really has everything covered. We've got therapists who just do individual work, and they normally have a niche, whatever they're really passionate about, whether it's depression or anxiety or OCD or maybe an eating disorder or whatever it might be. And then we've got therapists who do couples work and family work, and that's a whole different dynamic. And then we've got groups at 515 Therapy. Sometimes it's hard to find a group or a support outlet that people can really find, and so we're proud of that. And then we've got med management professionals, and so think of your psychiatric meds for anxiety or depression or bipolar. We've got 2 ARNPs on staff and a nurse on staff, and then we just added psychologists. And so psychologists are the people who do the testing. If somebody wanted to get tested for ADHD, let's say, or they had a child who was on the autism spectrum and they needed to get that testing done, we have psychologists on staff as well. And then I do also the business consulting under the 515 Therapy and Consulting umbrella. So we're a large group private practice trying to make mental health available and accessible and help everyone in Iowa live a better life. We're really trying to break in, Ryan, I'm so glad that I can share this with you. We're really trying to break into rural areas, and there's a need for that. I come from a small town in southeast Iowa called Columbus Junction.
Okay, I'm from West Point area, so
yeah,
just
for
down
sure.
that area.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you know, sometimes there's not a big town, as we would say, in the county, right? So there might not even be a mental health professional there. And so one thing that COVID did for us, COVID, of course, changed every industry. I'd love to hear how it made you pivot, but in the mental health world, nobody was really doing telehealth in the Midwest before COVID happened. Clinicians on the East and West Coast were doing it, but really Midwest, we knew about it, of course, but we didn't have to do it. Well, when the world shut down in March of 2020, we had to pivot just like everybody else. And so we had to find a platform that was HIPAA compliant. Everybody would always say, Ramona, why can't you just do it on Zoom? Well, it's not HIPAA compliant, right? So we had to find HIPAA compliant platforms just like everybody else in the mental health space. And so now we can serve everyone in Iowa. And because I am a small town girl, I do have a heart for that. So we're really trying to do some more marketing to get into those smaller communities to say, we are sitting in West Des Moines, but we can help you wherever you are. As long as you're an Iowa resident sitting in Iowa, we've got mental health therapists and med management people and psychologists who want to help you live a better life. And I'm super proud about that.
No, I love it. Yeah, and we'll definitely talk about kind of your career path, but there's some other things you're doing as well with like executive coaching and kind of the business side, which we'll touch on as well. I think this topic is so important because even if someone's like an owner operator, eventually there's a team. You might work with contractors. You might work when you work with your customer base. Understanding how to like meet people where they're at is such a hard thing for people if you're not a people person.
For sure.
So it's kind of hard. So I think it's a huge topic and something that everyone can benefit from hearing from. So excited to have you on today.
Yeah, so thanks. So you had asked me kind of what my overview, and I kind of really went down that rabbit hole, but it's something that I'm passionate about. So then, in addition to be a therapist and a business consultant for 515, I also serve as a Vistage chair. Vistage is the world's leading peer advisory group for CEOs, presidents, owners, founders. Think of that top-level person for non-competing industries. So there are 4 Vistage groups in the Des Moines Metro. I'm very proud to be one of those chairs. And again, they have to be from non-competing industries. So those leaders from those top industries come together for a full day meeting. Half of the day is a speaker that Vistage sends to us. And usually those speakers, Ryan, are speaking to hundreds or thousands of people. And Vistage sends them in, flies them in to speak to our local group. So that's a huge advantage. And then the other half day, Ryan, is what we call issue processing. And that's where everyone around the table is going to bring an issue, something that they struggle with. And what we immediately notice is that while we're all unique and individual, those issues, many times about people, to your point, are pretty common, right? And so, but that leader brings that issue, and then we really do a great job of peeling back that onion and helping them find out what the real issue is, because sometimes they come to the table and they say, this is my issue. And then as we ask those clarifying questions, we figure out that, there's a much deeper issue there. And many times it's on the personal side, how it's impacting their family, their home life, and all of that. And then we can really help them find answers and solutions to that. And so it's a very safe, confidential, private day out of their month. And again, what they've told me is that's just the best investment that they make for their business because they can't get that anyplace else. And then they also, each member, Ryan, gets executive coaching with their chair. So that's me in this situation. So they come to my office for 2 hours every month and we can talk about anything. When I first became a Vistage chair, because I am a therapist, I kind of wanted to set the stage, and I said, we're going to talk about the F word a lot. And they all kind of chuckled. And I said, yeah, the F word is feelings, and you'll be surprised, maybe you won't be surprised, but leaders many times want to shy away from that. They want to keep it all about the ROI and the profit margin and all of that. But they're human, right? And so my team has really leaned into that, I think, because I am a therapist, and we do go really deep on an emotional level, and they are creating psychological safety for one another. And that's why I think that one day a month is so priceless and so valuable for them. Sure. So I love that.
Sure. Well, I think that's a good cross-section because, like you said, most business people that are in a C-suite role would be like taboo as all get out for therapy. I'm not going to therapy, but it's like, coaching?
Bring it.
Coaching? Yeah.
Bring it, right?
It can drive profits and see better ROI. Like, let's do it.
Correct. Let's do that.
Yeah,
That's a great investment, right?
Yeah.
But so many times too, Ryan, they don't want to talk about that the business is having a hardship or whatever, or that it's struggling and it's not having a great year, because what they want to portray, and rightly so, is that the business is one to be dependent on and all of that. But sometimes the business does go through a hard time. So they need that safe space to say, hey, it's really sucking right now. And I need help. Or maybe it's in their personal life. Like, hey, I'm really having trouble in my marriage, and that is really impacting how I show up at work. And can you help me work through that, right? And so the team is really all about doing life together. And one thing that we're very proud of on my team is really understanding our personal why. And our group's why that we came up with is better together. Sounds so simple, but it's a thread that I can pull through my whole life. I am an only child. My ex-husband was an only child, and we had an only child. By choice. And that's lonely. you know? And so for me, having people around me and having a tribe of people that I want to be with on a very regular basis is super important to me. So I get that at 515 Therapy and Consulting with doing that work. And then I get that by being a Vistage Chair. Most importantly, I get that with my wife, who is my partner for life and our families. But that is our why for Vistage, that we are better together. And I think that leaders in today's world, I'm thankful that they also get that it's not impressive to try to be Superman or Superwoman and think that you have everything figured out. I tell people all the time, if you are entertaining joining our group, you have to be humble, right? I don't want somebody to come into the team that thinks they know it all, because number one, no one does. And number two, I want people to be curious and hungry to grow and think, I need others around me to be the person that I was meant to be. So that's kind of how we roll.
Sure. No, I love that. In classic therapy fashion, I need to go back before we can go forward. So tell me about
great.
your past. I'd love to hear, where'd you grow up? What was your childhood like? Where are you from
that's
originally?
great. Yeah. So I told you I was an only child. Grew up on a farm in Columbus Junction, Iowa, which is south of Iowa City. You're going to date me, Ryan. My goodness. Product of I was born in 1964, so went to high school in the early 80s and college at the University of Iowa. Go Hawks.
I'm sure it'd be a crazy decade to be alive. I feel like the 80s just seems like the coolest time in the world.
Absolutely. It was, and yet I can tell you, I told you earlier that I have a passion for rural. We went through the 80s farm crisis, and my family were farmers, and that was really hard. And thinking about things that shaped me, again, you weren't around at that time, but many farmers were committing suicide, and it was tough. And I'll tell you a story. We also had horses on the farm, and we had bought a horse from a gentleman up the road in a small town, and that man was really going through a hard time and made national and global news. Shot his banker, shot his wife, and committed suicide. And that just sadly told the story of what was going on in rural America. My dad struggled with mental health issues. He's dealt with depression most of his life. And so that was a very real time. So while the music and the big hair of the 80s were great, the farm crisis of the 1980s was very tragic. And so anyway, graduated from Columbus Junction, went to the University of Iowa, thought I wanted to be the next Joan London, and that's really going to date me too, but really thought that I wanted to be a television news broadcaster. And so doing this kind of work is reminiscent of maybe a dream deferred, but really had that hope, but then stayed in my small hometown, married my now ex-husband, that was a peaceful divorce, and I have nothing but good things to say there. But went into banking because there wasn't a TV station around close by. I would have had to drive to the Quad Cities or Cedar Rapids, and I wasn't going to do that on a daily basis. So got a great job at a bank and was fortunate. Again, this is going to date me, but I led a group travel club for bank customers. Kind of ties that better together thread. So there were a lot of bank clubs around, Ryan, but we were sitting in a small little town of Columbus Junction, Iowa, and we did a lot of things really unique. I've always kind of liked to color outside the lines. A lot of those bank clubs of that day, you had to be a senior citizen. And I said, oh, no, we're not going to have you can be a senior citizen, right? But it's going to be open to anyone who met the financial requirement, and the financial requirement was pretty low because I wanted everybody to go on these trips. But we traveled not only the United States, but we traveled the world. I took 90 people to Australia and New Zealand, and I took 65 people to Switzerland, and I took 60 people to Greece and Turkey. And so we traveled all the time, and I did that for 14 years. And so I was very, very, very honored to do that work. After that work, I went into ministry, and so I was a pastor for about 15 years. Again, that was a pivotal moment in my life when I really gave my life to God and didn't want to do things alone anymore. So that's kind of that thread of better together, and that really changed my life. Long story short, then I did that for about 15 years and was traveling around the Midwest, speaking for Jesus and doing all of that. And then I met my now wife, Sue, at a Christian women's conference where I was the speaker and she was in charge. And we just knew that we were meant to do life together. And so we both prayerfully divorced, and that was a very hard thing to do. And yet we just knew it was the right thing to do. And so I moved from Columbus Junction, Iowa to Des Moines to start my life over. And I tell people all the time, it's really easy to stand on the mountain and get the trophy and raise the glass and toast of everything that you've done well. It's really hard to crawl through the valley with your fingertips getting bloody and dirty. That was a difficult time. Got a lot of hate mail. Got a lot of people telling me I was going to go straight to hell because I was with a woman. And yet we had done it prayerfully. And again, shout out to my ex-husband. We divorced prayerfully. And, I'm on very good relationships with him, and I'm very thankful for that. So got a lot of hate mail from people that had nothing to do with it, and yet I was the recipient of that. Anyway, had to start life over, right? And a small town girl from Columbus Junction, Iowa, coming to a big city in Des Moines. And what was I going to do? So went back to banking because I knew banking. Got a job at Bankers Trust. I'm a huge fan of Bankers Trust. Love them. They were very good to me. And then did some ministry work after that. And then really my wife's daughter, Crystal Hemisath, had started 515 Therapy and Consulting. And she said, Ramona, I've known you for a while now, and I see gifts in you, and I think you'd make a great mental health therapist. And so if you want to go back to school and get your master's, you'll have a job waiting for you.
And you're like, I've got it. I was a pastor,
right,
I was a banker.
Right. And now I'm doing this, and I'm going back to school, Ryan, and I'm old enough to be some of these students' mothers, right? I mean, let's be serious. And so that was another time where I just felt, okay, what am I doing? But God had clearly opened that door, and I knew that it was my job to step through it. And I didn't know what it was going to look like other than I'd have a wonderful job waiting for me at 515 Therapy. So that was great. But did my master's at Drake. That was a very good experience. And as I reflect back, Ryan, I think a lot of leaders can say this. In high school, many people told me, Ramona, you should become a therapist, right? But I didn't listen. I'm always somebody that wants to know everybody's story. I believe people have a story, and I love to get to the meat of the story and help them feel safe enough to tell it. So as I look back on my life, I think I should have been doing this work for a long time sooner than I have been. But God always has a way of bringing things around. So got my master's, started to work, and then what I missed about being a pastor, Ryan, was preaching. That was my favorite part. I loved being in front of the congregation, loved delivering the word of God. And so Crystal said to me, Ramona, I see a lot of gifts in you for that too. So if you want to start speaking for mental health, do it, right? So she really opened up the door for me to create that. And she had named it 515 Therapy and Consulting for a reason. And she felt strongly that someday the company would lean into that. And I've been kind of a vessel to do that. And so I started speaking about mental health. That's where we met at the Iowa Employment Conference. That steadily grew. And then that leads me to the Vistage side. I was doing speaking for a company and for a CEO that has been very influential in my life, John Kenworthy of Story Kenworthy Workspace, the CEO there. And I was doing speaking for them about mental health in the workplace. And John looked at me one day, Ryan, and he said, Ramona, have you ever done business consulting? And I was honest. I said, nope, but I'm sure we can figure it out together. And that man believed in me. And long story short, we started doing that. And I started meeting with their executive leaders. That was now 4 years ago. And they just signed up for another year. So we're going on that 4th year. But John was a Vistage member. And so he was part of that. And he said to me, Ramona, I think you'd make a great Vistage speaker. And I said, John, I know nothing about Vistage, but I'm always willing to learn more. And I think that's another key about leaders, that I think having that open and curious mindset of, hey, I don't know this, but I'll take this coffee with this person to find out what it's about. I think that's time well spent. And so I said, I don't know anything about Vistage, but I'm always willing to learn more. And so John teed me up with his Vistage chair, Bob Vedral, in town. Bob Vedral as a chair and Steve Lacey as a chair. And anyway, Bob said to me, Ramona, I think you'd make a great Vistage speaker, but I think you'd make a better Vistage chair. And I think that Vistage needs a woman chair in Des Moines. Long story short, Ryan, that's not an easy thing to do. I tell people all the time, building a Vistage team is some of the most beautiful work I've ever done and the hardest work I've ever done, because you're asking CEOs to take a full day out of their month and to put a chunk of change down to be in the group. And the common objections are, Ramona, I don't have the time, right? And sometimes I don't have the money in the budget. So overcoming those objections, right, is part of the battle. But also then, Ryan, it's about putting the right people around the table. And as soon as you get your first member, and I can remember that clearly, you have to think about who is going to be number 2. And we're now at 13, but the art of the chair is not only do they have to be from non-competing industries, they have to be different and yet fit well together. And I give God all the glory on that because he's really helped me put the right people around the table. But like I said, it's the hardest work I've ever done. Less than 30% of people who go through Vistage Academy and get chosen by Vistage to be a chair actually make it. And so it's hard work. You have to launch with 8. And, that's a hard job. But now we're at 13, and we're really excited about that. So that's a passion of mine to help those leaders really live their best life.
Sure. No, I love that.
Yeah.
So many things I'd love to unpack about your journey through life, because there's these things that we've talked with a ton of different people that have been in your chair that have been through kind of crazy stuff, or their journey is kind of wild. Through these, I would say, key defining, figuring out who you are in this world moments.
Yeah.
What are some of those, what's some of the thoughts going through your head of becoming a pastor? Okay, I'm going to leave the private sector and go do this. Or even, the process where you're kind of discovering okay, I'm going to my husband and I are gonna split, and we're gonna go do this new portion of life, and it's gonna come with a lot of negative feelings and hate, if you will, and kind of realizing this is my North Star, this is what I'm gonna follow, this is where I'm being led to. What was some of the emotional tie behind that, and kind of your journey to make those big decisions?
Yeah, for me, Ryan, and again, I just speak only for myself. But for me, whether I acknowledged God was there or not, God was always there, right? And so as I look back, I always identified as a Christian, but I never really had a close relationship until I was in my mid-30s. But as I look back on high school, I had a sophomore English teacher who got me to go out for speech. And I didn't do speech before as a freshman, but she said, Ramona, I think you can do speech, and I think you can do it well. So that year, she selected my readings, and one of them was from the Bible, from the Old Testament, where Moses is telling Pharaoh, let my people go. And not only did I get straight ones at every competition, including state, but I was also selected to be an all-state speaker as a sophomore, which was a big deal. Interestingly now, the Iowa State Association for Speech is in the same office building where I work. No accident there. And recently, Ryan, I just walked down the hall, and there's a guy probably your age that is working there, right? I don't know him from Adam, but I walked in and I told him that story. I said, we are on the same floor now, and it was many decades ago when somebody believed in me and got me to go out for speech, and that I can look back and think, wow, God was at work there, right? And so that was powerful. So that was a guiding North Star. I think for me, to find God originally, I had an eating disorder for 12 years, and that was significant. That really shaped my life. And when I finally recognized that I couldn't beat that on my own and needed God's help, I was smart enough to turn to God, and that really changed my life. And I would tell you that it even changed my family's life. I'll tell you a quick story about my son. So he was 12 when I gave my life to God, and I had had the eating disorder for 12 years. And I was traveling the world for that bank travel club job, and I hauled all my own food. I ate the same food, Ryan, for 12 years. And people are like, no, you didn't. I'm like, yes, I did. I never had one bite of birthday cake. I never had one piece of pumpkin pie at Thanksgiving. I ate the same food for 12 years. And so when I knew that I was really not well and needed God to intervene and ask God for help, that, of course, immediately came. But after that, I felt called to go into ministry, thanks to our pastor who said, Ramona, I think that you've obviously got a gift to speak, and I think you'd make a great pastor. So I remember practicing my first sermon on my son, who was probably then about 14. And we were in our living room, and I said something like, I gave my life to God in the summer of 2001. And Andy raised his hand. And I thought, you're interrupting your mother?
No questions till the end.
No
please.
questions till the end. Know your place, right? And I said, yes. And he said, Mom, it wasn't the summer of 2001. It was right before 9/11. And I said, and that was the summer of 2001. And he said, oh, I guess you're right. Go on. But I tell that story, Ryan, because September 11th, 2001, changed all of our lives, right? That is a hallmark moment, tragedy, where our world changed and safety was no longer how we defined it before. And he was 12 at that time. And he tied that event with something that also changed his life together in a very real way, so his mind wouldn't forget it. And when he said that, that was my confirmation that it had deeply impacted him. I can remember shortly after, I gave my life to God and I started eating normal food. My ex-husband husband at the time, and Andy and I were going to Iowa City to see a movie together. And I had always hauled my own food, right? And Andy was in the back, and I said, I'm going to eat in the food court with you and Dad before the movie. And he said, you are? And I said, yeah. I said, I really know that God's given me the strength to do this, and I know that I can make good choices. And I'll never forget what he said, Ryan. He said, Mom, can I tell my friends? And it almost makes me cry today, right? And it's been a long time since that day happened. And I said, oh, Andy, I said, that's so kind. I said, but let's just keep it among us. But he was 12 and a popular kid, right, in all the sports and had great friends. And his friends, I'm sure, talked to him that, oh, my goodness, Andy, your mom's kind of wackadoodle, right? She hauls her own food everywhere. And so the fact that a very popular, sports-minded, musically inclined kid would want to tell his friends that his mom was going to eat in the food court, that was powerful and helped me understand the depths of my story and how it had impacted his story. So your question was, what are those pivotal moments? Whether I knew it or not, God was leading me, guiding me, getting me in the right places at the right time. And thankfully, I think that he's given me the courage to follow. And sometimes I have said, no, I don't want to go there, right? So it's not always been courageous, but sometimes it has been courageous. And I think he calls all of us to follow, and sometimes we want to go the exact opposite direction. But for me, from my perspective, when I surrender, and I always told people, Ryan, when I was speaking, doing a lot of ministry work, traveling across the country when gas was $4 a gallon and losing money on every gig because I wasn't getting paid very much. Didn't do it for the money, but I would always tell people that I was someone who wore the title or the crown of control queen with pride, right? I wasn't the homecoming queen at Columbus Junction, but I was a control queen and wore that crown with pride. But when I took that crown off and really surrendered, that was when my life changed. And that is a state that I have to remind myself to stay in every day, right? That maybe doesn't come natural or easy for me. And so it takes hard work and effort to stay in that surrendered state and say, God, I am just a vessel, use me. And I do that in all my work, whether it's in therapy or my role as a Vistage chair. I was helping a leader with a situation just last Friday, and before I went into that, I just prayed and I said, God, I have no idea. I have no idea what you want me to do, but I know that you do. And then at the end of that meeting, that leader got to exactly where he knew he needed to be, and he told me that. He said, Ramona, I've got such clarity. And I said, I know you do. I can see that on your face, right? And so I just try to stay in that surrendered state and just be a vessel for the Lord.
I love that. As you were talking about, your only child, kind of that loneliness piece of it, but also having these people in your life that have presented you with a fork in the road and said, hey, I think you should do this. And what do you think about that? What's that been like for you to be like on the other side? Because now you're far enough along in the journey that I'm sure you've been that person for someone else where you present, hey, I think you'd be a great fit for this nonprofit chair or this career move what have you. When people come to you, like your daughter-in-law, and say, "Hey, change your career for the third time,"
correct,
or the priest saying, "Hey, you should go into ministry,"
correct,
or someone saying, "Hey, I think you should do this." How does it been for you to be that person for someone else and bring the best out of someone and present them with an opportunity that they wouldn't have found themselves?
That's a very good question. Yes, it's my wife's daughter who said to me, I think you'd make a great therapist. And so I have had opportunities like that where, hey, I think you would make a great XYZ, right? Put the label on it. And I can't tell you the joy, Ryan, that when their eyes light up because someone sees something in them and believes in them that they can do it. I know a person who I thought would be kind of similar situation that Crystal did for me. I know a person that I thought would be an excellent therapist. And so I told this person that, and they had not even completed their AA degree, their associate's degree. And so that path from going back to get your AA degree, to get your undergrad degree, to get your master's degree seemed long, right? And this person wasn't right out of high school, right? But when I said that to this person, Ryan, their eyes lit up and they're like, oh my goodness, I think you're right. And that person has told me, Ramona, it was your belief in me that gave me the courage and the motivation to start a very long journey, right? But because you saw that in me, I know I can do it. And so I've had people like that for me, and I think that paying it forward is just as better, if not more gratifying, because you're that person who gets to inspire somebody else to really be their best self that they can be. So that's been powerful.
Sure. No, I love that. You talked about some of your different kind of experiences through your youth. Is there any, I would say, major or even minor experiences that you had as a youth that have really shaped you into the adult that you are today?
Major or minor experiences as a youth. I tell people all the time that my parents, who are still living, and I'm very thankful for that, really demonstrated for me unconditional love. And I recently had a leader tell me that what they would like to experience this side of heaven is unconditional love. And so I'm very thankful that I was raised in a home where there was a lot of times, Ryan, when we were very financially insecure, but there was so much unconditional love. And that is still the same today, right? And so I've tried to pass that on to everybody, right? That to love them, as one of my current pastors, who's a pastor to me now, often says, Ramona, you just got to love them. And I think that's so true. I think in a world, Ryan, where there is so much hate and there's so much division, if we can show people that they are lovable and that we love them, I think that's powerful. My parents are now in their 80s, and my dad talks to his friends on a daily basis on the phone, right? And there's a couple guys where he talks to on a regular basis, and he's really proud, and rightly so. My dad has finally gotten those guys to say, I love you back, because my dad will say, hey, Ryan, I love you, buddy. And sometimes those guys, right, in that older generation are not used to saying that, right? Like, oh my goodness, this is weird. But my dad, through unconditional love, has gotten them to say it back. And so I'm a firm believer that love always wins, right? And so my grandchildren, I've got a little 7-year-old grandson and a little 3-year-old granddaughter, and we were visiting their church last Sunday, and so the pastor was talking about who is God. And then after church, I told my grandchildren, I said, the next time that pastor asks you that, I really want you to say that God is love. And because I'm a firm believer that is true, that God is love. And if we take nothing out of a sermon, if we can take that, that's enough. And so I think my childhood was rich in unconditional love, and that's, I think, how God wants to use me to, and even in the workplace where, we have to have boundaries and we have to be professional and all of that, but if we can love people in a professional manner and inspire them to be great and to help them believe that they can be great, and that whether they see it as God or a higher power or nature or whatever it might be, that they have a purpose and a calling to live out, that excites me, right? And that's how I think that I'm used, and that's the gift that I can share.
Sure. No, I love that. I think it's interesting, too, that people go through life whether they were missing pieces of their childhood and they wanted something different or what have you. I think just being intentional about that on the other side of being an adult and being like, maybe I didn't get the love and support from home, but I'm going to be that for someone else. Or I'm going to, it's like flipping it around rather than the woe is me. And it's like, oh, my upbringing is my outcome for the rest of my life. It's kind of that spinning it on a positive way of how can I affect someone in a positive way outside of just what I went through as a child, that type of thing.
Take the good pieces that you liked and change the pieces that were broken or that didn't serve you well, right? And we all have those. And then how can you go from being a victim to a victor and really changing that narrative, right? Because it's a choice. It's a choice on how we get to live our lives as adults, and the patterns that we want to repeat and the patterns that we don't want to repeat. And as a therapist, Ryan, I can honestly tell you that sometimes when I work with a client that stays stuck in that cycle, sometimes I just have to say, I think we're done with our work and I can, help you find another therapist or whatever, because I believe that there can be growth. But sometimes clients want to stay stuck because that's what they know, right? And so personally, my tolerance for that is not long. and other therapists are much more capable and willing and able and beautifully gifted to stick with people who have a longer time finding that out. I just know that I like to see growth and change and be that change agent for people. And so if their process is longer, I may not be the right fit. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. I've also seen interesting studies or I guess just content on social media about people like therapists that kind of just sit in the abyss and swirl with the clients, or someone that's like action oriented. That's like, okay, I've heard you. You need to work on this, that, and the other, and we'll come back next week and talk about it.
Correct.
And if you don't work on it, we're going to have some problems because I want you to get out of the swirl of evil.
Yes. And so good therapy comes in a lot of different forms. So there's not good, bad, right, or wrong. But I just know my style. And like you said, my style is much more not directive, that's too harsh, but much more encouraging, motivating, and want and expect to see positive change, right? And if that's not happening, then I dig into, okay, help me understand what staying in the stuckness, how that's serving you. And sometimes that's an onion that they've not peeled back yet, right? And so sometimes it's like that wonderful pair of jeans that we all have that we just put on and they're maybe dirty and grungy and we know that, but they feel good, right? And so that anxiety or depression that they think has defined them feels good. And sometimes they can't imagine a life breaking free from that. And the unknown is scary, right? And so I think that therapists can help them understand that, yes, it can be scary. And what's on the other side can be beautiful and new and healthy. And you can only imagine how freeing that can feel. Right? To get rid of those old jeans.
Sure. Just throw out the trash.
Yes, absolutely.
Get that monkey off your back type
absolutely.
of feel. You talked about this a little bit ago, and I think it affects everyone listening, is this like where the state of the world is right now. I talk to so many people, and that's the first thing people bring up when you meet someone is like, man, this is like a crazy time we're living in, like the most divided, angry, everyone just got feelings type of thing. I'd love to hear your opinion on kind of what you've seen with your clients and just in the practice as well, with like this victim mentality or this like you said, assuming this preset thought of like nothing will fix my problems, and while problems that people have, I'm sure are very serious and real. It's almost like this perpetual, I'm never getting off the angry bus. I'm never getting off the victim bus.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about how you've worked with people to get through that and kind of get through those mental barriers.
Yeah. I want to talk about it from two different perspectives, from therapy clients and then also from my speaking and what I do with organizations, because it's a topic for both. Therapy, we have clients from both sides of the aisle, so to speak, with very strong opinions, right? And so the therapy space is set up to be real and authentic, and the therapist has to create a space where that client can just unload, right? But because we knew that there were so many big emotions going on, we tried to launch a group where people could really come and process. I think it was called Processing the World, Ryan. And if I were a betting woman, I would have bet that we could have filled that group and had 3 groups running at the same time. I was shocked we couldn't get hardly anybody to sign up. And here's the reason why. I think people worried about even coming into a safe space like a therapy office for group therapy and being with people that had differing opinions.
Right.
And so while it was a great concept and we tried and we thought, this is going to be great, right? We're going to make a huge difference. It didn't work. And so that told us something there. So a lot more is done in the individual settings. On the business side, I just did a presentation for a large company last week, and the presentation title that they wanted me to speak on was Navigating the Intersection of Humanity and the Headlines. Navigating the intersection of humanity and the headlines.
That's every interaction ever.
Ever,
The
right?
barista at Starbucks, your next
Hello.
door neighbor getting the newspaper.
Hello.
At a parade.
Right.
With your neighbor, your friends walking in the.
Hello.
Oh, this is their. Okay.
Correct, right? And it was really meant for managers, because here's what's happening on the business side is that on the therapy side, we have clients coming in, with heightened emotions about whatever, right? So we can help them regulate and do all that. On the business side, managers are saying, I don't know how to lead through this. What do I do, right? How do I keep the peace and keep people focused on the purpose and the mission and the vision of the company, and yet not be a jerk and say, we're not going to talk about this? Because I think one thing that we've evolved to, thankfully, is that we want people to bring their authentic self to work. And so how do we create an authentic culture where all are welcome and we want your voice to be heard, and yet we know that conflicting voices can make the train go off the track, so to speak, right? And so it was all about creating psychological safety, using both and language rather than but. I'll give you an example. Like everybody follows each other on social media. And so one person with one side of the feelings might say, I'm friends with this person at work, but I can't believe that they posted that on Instagram. So just changing that but to an and, I'm friends with this person at work, and while I don't agree with that social media post, I can still work with them.
Right.
So it's really helping them pause and move from that hijacked brain to their logical brain. So I always say we have to teach people to respond rather than react. And I think it was a perfect time to do that presentation with Thanksgiving coming up and the holidays coming up. Yeah. People around the table are going to think differently than you and me, right? And Uncle Harry or Aunt Sally, sometimes they're going to be very vocal, right? And so how do we manage and have mashed potatoes not thrown against the wall, right? And so I think it's allowing people to express their opinion with respect, and I think respect has to be served up on the table, a healthy dose of it, right? And that leading with sentences from my perspective, or I feel, rather than this is truth, right? From my perspective, it feels like XYZ. And I always tell people, if you lead with that way, nobody can take away your feelings. From my perspective, to me, it feels like that. And then the other person can say, I hear you. And from my perspective, it feels like this. And these are two conflicting things. And then I would hope that because respect has been served up, both people can come together and say, what can we learn from one another? Mm-hmm. And this is what I said at that company. And I'm like, now you're getting the real Ramona, because now I can preach on this subject because I'm very passionate about this. I always tell people, in my opinion, I don't think anyone in Washington, D.C. is ever going to save us. I think that's a false notion. From my spiritual side, of course, I think there's a Savior. And from the human side, I think we are going to save one another. And that is about love conquering hate and love building a bridge. I'm going to date myself again back to the 1980s. But, when I was in college at Iowa and listening to country music, Winona Judd was a powerhouse, right? Winona and Naomi. And they had a beautiful song, Ryan, called Love Can Build a Bridge. Mm-hmm. And if you listen to those lyrics, it's an anthem that we should embrace today. I can't sing, but love can build a bridge between your heart and mine. Love can build a bridge. Don't you think it's time? And I think if we would be mindful of that at the end of the day, I can disagree with you and I can love you as a human being, that's going to change the world. Not on how did this Democrat vote on this and what did this Republican say. Love is going to move the needle.
Sure. No, gosh, what a profound thing. There's so much we could talk about with this. I think even in my own world, when I sit down at the table with someone or I meet someone and the first thing they say is, man, the world's crazy. And I'm like, you need to turn the TV off for a week and just go live your life. Because like you said, anyone in D.C. is not going to fix your life. And I think yes, some of the issues that are being passed and things do make a huge impact. But I think on the large scale of everything, if people didn't watch the news or their life would be a lot happier. And not to say that ignorance is bliss, but it's like sometimes for your own sanity.
Yes, for your
Unplug.
yes, for your own mental wellness. I mean, I'm a mental health counselor, and I'm telling people unplug, right? I mean, again, because the sun's got to come up tomorrow, right? And so, yes, and really thinking about what's important. You know, recently I asked my wife, who is the most wonderful person in my life, the most spiritual person I've ever known, and can't give her enough credit for who I am today. But I said, you know, really, what's most important to you at this stage of our lives, and how do you want to live every day? And because she's the most beautiful spiritual person I've ever met, number one, she took time to think about it, which I think is beautiful. And number two, she said, Ramona, my answer is I'm going to work really hard every day to see people as Jesus sees them. Right? And Jesus doesn't see Democrats and Republicans. Jesus sees the hurting person on the street, right? And so she said, I went to get groceries or whatever, and she said there was an older woman, and whether her sign was true doesn't matter, but it said, just had surgery, can't work. And my wife, Sue, you know, gave her a $20 bill, and that woman said, oh my God. And Sue said, if I would have been quicker, I would have said, yeah, oh my God, right? That my God is calling me to do this, and I see you, and so does he. But what a beautiful thing that she really, and she's already so good at it anyway, but her intention every day is to really see people as Jesus sees them. And that is the tired and the broken and the widow and the orphan and the person who's just having a bad day because their dog died. Right? And to see that humanity. And so the headlines are going to go on. There's going to be tragedies that happen. But navigating humanity and the headlines, I believe the way we find the way through is with love. And at the end of that presentation, Ryan, at the end of my PowerPoint, there was a quote by a man named John Green, and he said this: the only way out is through, and the only way through is together. And I believe that with all my heart. Thus, my better together. Why?
Sure. No, I love that. We talked a lot about kind of this, like, I would say, dichotomy of building your business, your clientele, but also trying to do good in the community, do good for your people. It's got to be a really hard industry to do that in, I would assume, being in therapy, because you probably don't get a lot of like avid Google review people, like, you know, I mean, there anymore. Yes, but it's like, it's still pretty taboo to admit to the public, like, yeah, I'm in therapy. It's like, well, what's wrong with you? Like, there must be something wrong.
Right.
When really there's probably something wrong with most of us. So.
Always, right? And so therapy isn't about what's wrong. Therapy is how can I live my best life, right? And so at 515 Therapy, I don't know if we've mentioned this or not, but I know I told you before we started that we're very proud of the work that we do in the community, and we recently won Metro's Best Mental Health Therapy Practice for Des Moines by the Des Moines Register. We're super proud of that. And so just normalizing therapy, right? We have a theater ad at the Palms, right? Because we want people as they're watching movies on the big screen to see us at 515 Therapy. We did a float at West Des Moines 4th of July parade with Inside Out. So we're trying to normalize therapy, to say, and I'll tell you this, Ryan, our younger population, especially like preteens and teenagers, man, they're talking about therapy. They're talking about who their therapist is. And so I think we'll see a shift in that, that stigma is coming down. But going back to what I said earlier about wanting to break into the rural populations, that stigma is still high in a lot of those rural pockets. I was talking to somebody. I was on a television show doing a segment, and there was a gentleman there promoting something in the ag industry, and he said, oh, I've got anxiety. And so I turned around and I said, hey, I'm a mental health therapist. I'm not taking new clients, but I work for a large private practice, and we could probably help you with that. And it was sad and funny at the same time, Ryan, because he quickly was like, oh, I don't mean that. Like, right, no, I'm fine. And he literally turned his back on me. And I'm like, oh my goodness, right? I mean, you had just said to somebody else that you have anxiety, but there's such a stigma, especially in rural and on the farm community. And my dad was way before his time, right? He's in his 80s now, but he was always talking about his mental health. And so we just want to normalize that mental health is a part of all of us as human beings. Our mental, our physical, our spiritual health makes us who we are. And so we really just want to normalize it and say, you don't have to have a big major crisis to come to therapy. It's about helping you live your best life, and you get to decide that. And we're just a professional support to help you on the journey. And that's a beautiful thing. And who wouldn't want to take that gift?
Sure.
You
sure.
know?
Well, I think it's something that a lot of people, like you said, children are now exposed to it more as like
Yeah.
counselors in schools, elementary, middle school, those things. But also accessibility is a lot higher now for these, different folks. I know when I went to college at Simpson in Indianola, and we had 2 full-time staff counselors on staff that would help with anything and everything. And I know when I was in college, I know Paige and I, my wife, we've been together since high school, 16 years. So
I love that.
We were kind of going through not a rough patch, but it was like I had just kind of come to college, and she was really worried about like all the new stuff because she went to trade school. So it was like a different experience for her.
Yeah.
And not being a student there, like what's going to happen, all the stuff. So rather than like just struggle through it, we're like, well, let's just like go. I mean, it's free.
Right.
Let's go talk to them and just, and that helped us a lot just to kind of talk through things and kind of work through. And it all comes down to communication, I feel like, of just like being able to share with your partner how you're feeling and what's bothering you and whatnot too. So,
and sometimes it just takes that professional in the room to help, right? Kind of refereeing and saying, okay, he's really not saying that, or that really wasn't her intent. Can we practice it in a different way? Right. And that's the beauty on marriage counseling or couples counseling and group therapy is it's just having that professional in the room to kind of referee and call the shots.
Sure.
Well,
there's even things we took, and this was like over a decade ago, but it's like just how we share about things now. It's different of not placing blame, but saying like, hey, like I really felt like this, even though it could be completely wrong of what actually happened. But it's like kind of upset me because of this, that, the other thing. And it's like you kind of understand how to really understand the other person. And it is such a huge thing where a lot of people, if you don't have a really, I would say like nurturing childhood, or your family or your friends didn't like talk about stuff well, it's hard to like just pick it up, It's like
absolutely,
it's a skill.
It's a learned skill,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Absolutely. And so I tell people all the time, Ryan, it's a muscle, and the more we use it, the better we're going to get. Or it's like hitting that baseball. You're going to maybe swing 3 times and not hit it, but on the 4th time you are. And the more you do it, the more you're going to connect. And so I'm so proud of you for knowing that it was at that time in your life a free resource that Simpson provided, and that you opened the door and walked through. And that's beautiful.
Sure. Yeah. And I always tell people, I'm like, just give it a try. If it doesn't work,
give it a try.
Then,
Here's the other tip I would tell people. If you start therapy and you don't like your therapist, you are not, hear me on this, you are not going to hurt that therapist's feelings. We need you to be really honest and say, hey, I don't feel like this is a great fit. Can you help me find somebody else? And if you're not comfortable in doing that, then of course, just tell the therapist that you need to end services and then find somebody else online, right? Sure. It's easy to find a therapist now. Ask friends, ask family members, ask work colleagues who they go to. Get a trusted referral and find somebody that is a good fit, because it is a partnership and you want somebody that you feel safe and comfortable and that somebody gets you.
Sure.
Totally.
Yeah. Switching gears a little bit, I'd love to talk about the business side, the leading with empathy, leading with love, the different things, because if people are listening in, it's like, oh, I'm more concerned about the business stuff. This all ties together, right? So I know you've given speeches and you work with small groups and all the things we mentioned about kind of leading with empathy, leading with love. What are some of the main themes or things that you feel like a lot of managers, business owners, leaders in business or the community really struggle to connect and bridge that gap with their people that are beneath them or their coworkers and things like that?
Yeah, they don't have to be a therapist. Obviously, they're not, but they do have to get comfortable with the F word. They have to get comfortable talking about feelings. And so I think a great way for a leader to do that is to model the way and start demonstrating what that looks like to the team members, right? And so if, heaven forbid, your dog did just pass, coming in and saying, you know what, I'm really sad today, or I'm really upset because my dog just died, right? And so before, I think managers and leaders thought, oh, I can't bring my personal life. Those days are gone. Yes, you can, and yes, you should, because the company's got to do better when you do. So I think that's one thing. And then I think educating yourself and if somebody does come to you in crisis, really knowing what the resources are available. So using your EAP, calling the professionals that you've got through your benefit program, helping people find the services that they need. I tell the leader and the manager, you don't have to have all the answers. You just have to know where to find them. And then I think culture is a big thing today, Ryan. People want to work for a place that has a strong mission statement, and that statement is not just on their website, but they're really living it, bleeding it, walking it. That permeates through all the threads of the company, so to speak. And so I think really having leaders demonstrate what that mission and value statement means to them and connecting the dots. Everybody has it on their website, but what does it mean for the company? How does it mean that when we show up in our community, what does that look like? And really, this is where the art of storytelling comes in. Why do we have that as our mission statement? Why do we have those values? I mean, they're great words, and maybe we use ChatGPT to find them, but there's a story behind them. And if there's not a story behind them, then they're the wrong words, right? If you just literally ChatGPT'd it or used Claude or whatever AI tool you want to use, and they don't mean anything to the company, then you've wasted your time. People want a story. We had a great Vistage speaker a couple months ago, and it was all about marketing, and it was really telling the story. And he talked about certain places in the country, Ryan, who are huge businesses and have huge success stories and outrate their competition, and it's all because they've drilled down on what their story is and they tell it well. And sometimes the story is not even what the business is about. There was one story, I think it was a lumber company, and so they mill and have all this wonderful lumber, but the story was the owner, the CEO, has a heart for veterans, and he was also a guitar player, so he would take that lumber and he would have these beautiful guitars made for veterans to teach them how to play the guitar. That's the story of that company. And people from across the country wanted to do business with that lumber company because of that story, right? So find your story, market your story, be really clear on your story. People remember stories. That's the fabric of our lives. And so I just believe helping people recognize that everybody has a story. Your people are your biggest asset. You've got to lean in and help them tell their story and how their story connects to your company's story.
Absolutely. Well, I think the other big piece too is probably just confronting like an elephant in the room, right? You have a big event happen in the country or something, there's mass layoffs going on. We can't just ignore this issue
Correct.
Or the people's paychecks are all bouncing and everyone's like freaking out about it. Like if you just
Correct.
ignore these huge things that are like the elephant in the room, I feel like that's the other piece too, just being really like honest with people of saying this is what actually is happening.
This is what is actually happening, and I think that transparency piece. Now, sometimes we can't give all the details, right? That CEO can't give all the details, nor should they, but they can paint the picture in a way that everybody can understand. And then I just did some crisis leadership with a company that really just went through a crisis, and so I was telling them, that team, that we're not going back to before, because there has been the fracture. So if you think that we're going to rebuild what was, that's impossible. We've now had this crisis event, and now we have to build something new. And so the whole theme for the time I was there was healing together and moving forward. And so a piece that I did for that team was I really started by having them close their eyes and really recognize the elephant in the room, like you said, that this crisis has taken place. Our goal today is to begin to heal together and move forward together. And if you can't do that, if you want to get off the train, so to speak, and you want to go in a different direction, that's okay. And now's the time to do it, because our goal is to heal together and move forward together. But giving people permission to get off the train because they want someplace else to go, that's okay. And I think leaders have to be brave to recognize that. I think sometimes the scarcity mindset and that employee retention mindset grips them, and they think, oh my goodness, if I lose an employee, what is the community fallout going to be? Sometimes it's just not a right fit, right? I go back to my divorce. It was prayerful, it was peaceful, and it just wasn't the right fit anymore, and that's okay.
Right.
Right.
Well, and even like you mentioned with the staffing or what have you, it's like, as long as you're consistently showing those values and like, hey, here's who we are as a group, here's where we're going. And like you said, there's plenty of stops on this train stop. If a year ago you were on the train, now you're not, you can get off, we can shake hands, what have you. Like if you're, dragging the rest of the company down because you're trying so hard to hang on to what you thought and that's not where we're going. Like you said, giving people an out where they don't feel trapped in there and they don't feel like it's, they can just do what they need to do. So
right. Because if they don't want to be going to California anymore, they want to go to Texas, right? Then we don't want them on the train to go to California because they're going to be naysayers or bring the train down or slow the train down, right? And we want them to go to Texas and have a hell of a time, right? Sure. So finding the right bus, finding the right people on the bus, and finding the right seats for the people on the bus is so important.
Sure. No, I love that. We're going to take a break from your story, and we do what's called the lightning round in the middle of the questions. So I'll have rapid fire questions. I've not briefed you on these at all.
Okay.
You can answer them as briefly or as not briefly. We've had our not so lightning round. Each answer is like 5 minutes, but you can do it.
I'll try to go fast.
No, it's okay. So the first question is, being a therapist yourself, do you go to therapy yourself? And if so, what has that experience been for you being on the other side of the clipboard, so to speak?
Yeah. When I was in my master's program, they said every therapist needs a therapist. So I so believe in that. And when I am on that other side, that's so helpful because I'm reminded very quickly what it's like to be the client, right? And so I think that every therapist needs a therapist. I've been hugely benefited by that, opening up and having that real space to talk about things that other people maybe don't know about or whatever is super helpful. So yes, I would highly recommend.
Sure. Love that. What's the most challenging, I would say, emotion or experience that many clients are struggling with on kind of the macro in terms of, you mentioned like anxiety, depression. What are some of those bigger issues that you typically see in your chair?
Heightened emotions about the current world climate, right? People are overwhelmed. People are confused. People are pissed off. People are angry. People are frustrated. So those heightened emotions, and sometimes, this is a really sad one, sometimes people can feel hopeless, and that's a really hard emotion to help them navigate through. So those would be the big emotions.
Sure. No, that totally makes sense. We mentioned some kind of like myths or things you've had to debunk in the industry. What do you feel like is one myth about therapy that you wish you could dispel to the public?
I really wish that rural people would know that therapy is not a weakness, that therapy is a different tool. Just like they've got in the machine shed, they've got lots of different tools to plant the field. Therapy is a tool, and it can help you be a more balanced person for every season. I guess I'm thinking in farming terms, but for every season of your life, it's not a weakness. It is a strength to say, I need help, and that's a beautiful thing.
Sure. I love it. What is a superpower that you wish you had as a therapist and mind reading is not an option?
I love that. A superpower that I wish I had as a therapist. Well, again, I think I self-disclosed to you. Sometimes I wish that I did have more capacity to sit longer with people. And I sit a long time, don't get me wrong. But sometimes there have been times where I've just known that I haven't been serving the client as well as they deserve. And that's my own stuff.
Sure. No, that makes total sense. What is a hill that you would die on, or something that you're like absurdly passionate about that you like every conversation you typically end up talking about it?
God and my wife. Absurdly passionate about both. Jesus, God is the most important figure in my life, and my wife is right up there. And doing life with her and glorifying the Lord, it's what I'm about all day, every day, and I will always find a way to bring God in the conversation.
Sure. Well, that proves true. We've already been talking for about an hour, and I think that we're on that as well.
Yep.
And then last question here, how do you typically relax after an especially like heavy day of work, or you have some really tough conversations like, man, I really just need to unplug for a little bit?
Yeah. We have 2 miniature golden doodles, and one of them is the therapy dog for 515 Therapy. So she actually comes to work with me many days. So she sees clients too, Ryan. I always tell people she doesn't take insurance. Her payment is pets, right? But when Sadie and I get home from work, many times we like to go for a walk. That can kind of cause some anxiety, but I learned something from a guy that I was doing executive coaching with today. His dad is a vet, and I was telling him, man, I just want to take Sadie and Snickles on a walk and not have them stop at every light pole to smell the smells. And he's like, Ramona, I get it. He said, but my dad is a vet, and he told me that smell sense that those dogs have really releases energy, and that energy release is just as powerful as the physical walk. I'm like, okay, dang, now I feel bad that I'm dragging them around the block, right? So I'm going to do a better job, Brian, of letting them stop at every light pole, sniff the sniffs, and feel good. Other than that, I have to confess, I like a good Netflix series and binge watch, and we are suckers for Dairy Queen. So we like to go get Dairy Queen, come back, watch a good Netflix series.
Sure. Love it. What's been your go-to Netflix series right now? Anything new?
Oh, it's not new, but I love it. Probably the best series I've ever seen, Poldark.
Okay.
Love that. 5 seasons, set in England in the late 1800s, about a mining community. Okay. Mining is in my past on my dad's side, so that resonates. And boy, they didn't have an easy life.
Sure. No, man, I love that. I always love hearing suggestions. People go check it out on Netflix.
Must see.
Love it. Kind of tying it all together here, we had talked about business. We talked about kind of your journey.
Yeah.
I'd love to kind of get a little bit more into like how the audience can, I would say, be like more of a better human. How can like things we can do to kind of improve like emotional intelligence, things that like good kind of pieces to take away. One of those questions really is, how do you build rapport with people that you just met and kind of allow them to open up so quickly? Because I picked this up on you when I first met you, especially, I mean, you're in a room full of a bunch of women. People just came up to you and they're like, Ramona, how you doing? Like, you build rapport quickly with people, and I can pick that up from you pretty quickly. What are some things that you've done to help kind of build that rapport with people quickly, and especially when you meet a new client, you know they're going to spill their guts to you.
Right.
How do you connect with someone so quickly?
Absolutely. I would say eye contact, Ryan. I mean, really holding someone's attention. You know, I think sometimes, especially since COVID, we've been, you know, behind screens for so long and we forget how to make eye contact. And I'm not saying that we just have to stare at one another like that, but keeping that eye contact, I think being enthusiastic, and I use my hands a lot, and being engaged. And then as a therapist, I mean, some people would say, oh my goodness, you should never hug a client. I always ask a client, I always say, hey, can I give you a hug? And right, I do. If they want a hug, I'm going to give them a hug. I believe in the power of appropriate physical touch. And if they want a hug, they're struggling, or if they're struggling and I'm sitting in my chair and they're sitting on the couch, I'm going to come over and say, hey, I'm right here with you, right? And so having people know that they're not in it alone, and leaning in and being fully invested in their life and that they matter.
I love that so much.
Yeah.
And for me, sometimes I feel kind of like a therapist because I interview so many people.
Yeah, I'm sure you
about
do.
Kind of deep stuff and other things where kind of their journeys and things. But I always find like finding the one thing someone's passionate about and letting them just talk endlessly about the thing. Sometimes it blows up in my face. There was one time at a Christmas party where I was 4.5 hours into a conversation with a guy that loved hunting.
Do you like hunting?
No, I could not get him to stop talking about it.
Oh my goodness.
But man, he's like my best friend now.
Right, passionate.
He's like, man, I'm so sorry I ruined your entire night, but I just love this stuff. Mike, I couldn't tell.
Right, but you gave him the open space to do that. And so many times, Ryan, people just need to be heard, and they don't have that opportunity, right? And again, because we live in short sound bites, people want to tell their story. And so he's passionate about hunting, and he educated that day, and now you know more about it.
Yeah, no, he's
it's
like,
awesome.
You're the best listener ever. I'm like, you can
You
call it
got
what
it.
you want, I guess. I love it. Because I think it's interesting too, like kind of you've talked about these pivotal moments in your life that give you a lot of like clarity on who you are now and where your life is going and things that a lot of people probably are struggling with similar things. So I think that helps that connection piece. When you look back at your own life story, what is kind of a moment that you recognize as like a turning point that you feel like you really kind of lean into current day, but you can also like help with your clients and say, hey, I've gone through a similar turning point in my life, and here's how we worked through it. Here's how I figured it out.
Yeah, and sometimes in therapy, here's another thing that they, taught us in school is that the therapist is never supposed to self-disclose.
Sure.
And I do, right? Because when it's appropriate, I think it's appropriate. And if it's healing and therapeutic, I'm going to self-disclose.
If someone's going through a faith journey similar to yours,
Correct.
or
have been divorced, right? And a
Yes.
faith person, right?
Yeah.
And so it's never about me, but if I can drop that seed to say, I know personally how you feel. I'm divorced as well, right? Then that's just helpful, and that's built that bridge. And then they're like, oh, she gets me, right? Whereas if the therapist just never self-discloses, and a lot of therapists never do, and that's fine, works for them. But then I wonder if I were the client, would I truly be open and authentic as I would want to be? Because I would be like, I don't know if they get me. So I chose to do that. I'll tell you a quick story. Do we have time?
Yeah, let's do it.
So I had a couple come to me a long time ago, a couple years ago now, it doesn't matter. Anyway, they came to me because I had been a pastor, and so they wanted that faith-based perspective. Great. I was divorced at the time, but Sue and I were not yet married, but we were together. We've been together for 14 years now. Anyway, it became very obvious, Ryan, that the couple was not LGBTQ affirming. Great. Not a problem, right? It's never my job to impose my values or my thoughts on anybody else. So kept that private. But the gentleman would always say to me, I had said that I was divorced because I wanted them to know that. And the gentleman would say to me often, Ramona, do you have a boyfriend? And I'd say, nope. And he said, oh, I find that hard to believe. Are you sure you don't have a boyfriend? And I'd say, nope. Well, one time, Ryan, they came into my office and they said, we just got back from vacation. And I said, oh, we did too. And the minute I said we, I knew I was in trouble. Mm-hmm.
And so I got a phone call the next day, and the gentleman called me. And I knew exactly where he was headed. And he said, Ramona, you've told us that you're divorced, and we understand that. It happens to a fair amount of Christians. We get that. But I've asked you if you have a boyfriend, and you've said no. But yesterday in session, you said, we just got back from vacation. What gives? And here's where love can build a bridge. And I'm a firm believer in meeting people where they are. I said, I'm going to call him Joe. That's not his name, obviously. But I said, Joe, I said, thanks so much for the question. I said, let me remind you that we have a professional, therapeutic relationship, and I don't owe you an answer to that question.
Okay.
Thank you for asking it. And because I like you, Joe, I'm going to tell you the story. I said, I am with the most spiritual person I have ever known. They are my life partner. They make me a better Christian on a daily basis. This person is my spiritual partner, my romantic partner, my partner for life. And her name is Sue. I said, Joe, if you have a problem with that, I totally get that, and I will gladly find you another therapist. He thought for a minute, and he said, no, Ramona, he said, thanks for being honest. And he said, you've really helped us do good work, and we want to continue with you. I had never had a picture of Sue and me in my office. From that day forward, I put a picture of Sue and I up, and I thought, they need to know the real me.
Sure.
Now, the funny part of that story, true story, is I've had 3 different people, 3 different clients, Ryan, through the years that I've had that picture of Sue and I up. Look at that picture. It's Sue and Ramona holding our 2 dogs. 3 clients have said, looking at the picture, Ramona, are those your daughters? And I'm like, what the heck? I'm like, no, that's me and my wife. And they're like, no. And they're like, well, when was that picture taken? And I'm like, 2 years ago for our church directory. I mean, they'd really try to backpedal and get their way out of it. But so I put the picture of Sue and I up because I wanted people to know, but it's kind of come to bite me in the butt sometimes because I must not be aging well.
Sure. Well, and it's such a hard thing because like you said, the what do you divulge, what do you not? But with that being such a big part of who you are and your journey, and again, it's not going to jive with everyone, especially if someone in your case with Joe coming in here with they're very faith-based, and that'll ruffle a lot of feathers for most people. So,
absolutely.
But it's hard because it's like you just assume if someone was married to a man, they're continued to be interested in men, and that's correct. That's what you would assume with a situation like that. So it's easy to kind of confuse people, I'm sure.
Correct. That would be another nugget of wisdom that I guess I would drop, Ryan. There's a great book that I teach from often. It's called The 4 Agreements. Oldie but a goodie. Has a spiritual bent to it, but even if you don't take anything spiritual away from it, the author says if you'll follow these 4 agreements, it'll change your life. And agreement number 1 is be impeccable with your word. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Number 2, don't make assumptions. Number 3, don't take anything personally. And number 4, always do your best. And so number 2 and 3, don't make assumptions and don't take anything personally. Of course, we have to make some assumptions. You're going to make an assumption that you're going to get home safely tonight, as am I. We have to make assumptions every day. But I think we can slow down the train when we really back up the train and say, am I making an assumption here? And if I am, do I have any evidence to support that? And if I don't have any evidence, then it's just an assumption, right? And an assumption really might make a fool out of us. Right? And so that's where asking curious questions comes in, right? And being open to whatever the answer might be. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I think it's an interesting thing because we mentioned this crazy time, as everyone keeps saying, but there's so many situations where people, I would say, like they read the first sentence of a book and they immediately think they've read it already.
Right.
It's that first impression thing, but you think you backfill. There's so many times I'll meet people that are extremely faith-based that assume everyone they meet is.
Right.
And it's like that, that's a crazy assumption that, or the opposite, or not the opposite, but they're very strongly opinionated one way or the other politically.
100%.
And they think everyone they meet is the exact same. And I'm like, this is
dude, that's not the way it works. Absolutely. So that's why I tell people always start with from my perspective or from my vantage point, or this is what works for me, right?
Right.
Because again, it's not about being the same. It's telling your story in a genuine manner, but from my perspective. And that's that humility piece,
Sure.
right? Is that it doesn't apply to everybody, and that's okay.
Sure.
That's okay.
Well, I'd imagine as you went through this journey, your faith journey, but also your divorce and kind of coming out the other end, a new person, I'm sure you had a lot of interesting conversations with close friends or
Yeah.
people that had disagreements or unalignments with where you're heading. Were there any that you had that were like, how did we have a friendship that lasted this long?
Yeah.
Or were there any that surprised you that were like, man, I was expecting this conversation to be a lot harder, but
Yeah.
you're taking this way better than I thought you would for me kind of telling you that I'm going down this new path.
Yeah. Some people were very supportive and some people weren't, right? And that was just the reality. But I remember that I had an older gentleman in the church that I was pastoring at the time, and he said, Ramona, if you don't own your narrative and make your narrative clear, others will make up your narrative for you. And that was powerful because, to be really honest, at that time, Ryan, Sue and I were trying to figure it out. We just knew that God was calling us to be together. We both were getting divorced. I'd been married for 25 years. She'd been married for 42, right? So it wasn't easy. And we were trying to figure it out. It wasn't clear other than we knew that God was calling us to be together. But that was really powerful that I had to own my narrative and speak my truth so that others knew my truth, because there was a lot of assumptions and a lot of prejudice going on. And if they had just asked the question, hey, Ramona, can you tell me about this? It might have been a different outcome.
Absolutely.
Well,
I think it's anything that would be considered socially taboo today. Things are changing a lot.
Yeah.
5 years from now will be different. 10 years from now will
Yeah.
be different. I think that's a huge issue that a lot of people have, is like anything that's unique or different or hard to describe in a sentence. If there's not someone that's like, I would say, explain, like meeting someone at that, they can tell that, hey, this is confusing you, or about like you said, meeting someone at that point of like,
yeah.
you're not going to offend me. I understand this is different or confusing. Let me help you explain kind of what this is.
Yes.
I think we see that a lot with all the different sexuality things that are coming out, and especially young kids in school, and
Yes.
all the things with trans rights, all the things going
Yes.
on. It's gray area for a lot of people, and it's confusing to a lot of people. And like you said, if there's no I would even say this would be like 10 years ago or 20 years ago, it would have been like, it would have been hard for someone to explain homosexuality to the mass majority. Now that is pretty commonplace.
Correct.
Where like current day, I would think it's like people that are going through kind of one of the subsexualities that people really need like a textbook definition for,
Yeah.
or they're trans and they're trying to explain, well,
Yeah.
I was this and I am this, or I'm going through this journey. I think that's kind of the hard thing, is like meeting people where they don't know where the answers are for things, and then
Yeah.
they just make assumptions. So
Yeah. Well, and again, just being curious. A couple years ago, I was meeting downtown with a top leader, and so had told him my story because he was curious, and that's fine. I'll tell him my story, right? But then he asked a curious question. He said, Ramona, what was your coming out process like? And I said, you got to back up the bus, because you're making an assumption that I identify as lesbian, and I don't, right? I'm married to a woman, but I don't identify as lesbian. I found my person, right? And my person happens to be female. It has nothing to do with gender. It has everything to do with that she is my person, right? And so I think just he's like, wow, you taught me something today. And I'm like, thanks for giving me that opportunity, right? And so just helping people find ways to say, hey, that's really not what I meant, and I think we're making an assumption here, and let's back up the bus, and I need you to know this.
Sure.
All right, and that's just being brave and putting more pieces in the puzzle.
Sure. No, I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
So, and just me being a naturally curious person, what would you categorize yourself then if
Right.
you're not in that bucket?
And I tell people all the time, I have great friends who are lesbian. So again, I'm very pro LGBTQIA plus, right? All that. So again, there was a struggle with that when Sue and I first got together, because I'm like, but I'm not lesbian. I'm not attracted to women. I just love Sue, right? So struggled with that a lot. And then I think God helped me see, Ramona, there's too many labels are helpful to a point, but at the end of the day, you know who you are. She knows who she is. I've called you together to do life together and serve me and love. That's enough. And if people want, so a lot of people mislead, and that's fine, but I was talking about assumptions, so I wanted to, expand on that. And so if people call me lesbian, I don't get offended. That's fine. But for that leader downtown, when he asked that question, I wasn't going to speak an untruth and talk to him about a process that many people have gone through. And it's a
Sure.
very difficult process. And that wasn't my experience, right? So again, it's about, is this label helpful? Do we need a label? For me, I don't think so.
Sure.
I love Sue.
There you go. No, I love it.
And that's enough.
I love it. No, and it's with any category of life, you talk about somebody that is religious. A lot of people would think, oh, well, are you Catholic? Are you
Yep.
Christian? Are you what denomination? What? And it's like, well, how much time do you have for certain people? It's like, well, I was this, now I'm this, now I'm not. Or some people want to label certain things, and then again, jump to the last page of the book and assume they know everything about the person. And it's like, their journey through their faith journey or their sexuality or anything in life, their career, anything, like to think, oh, you've been a therapist, you're always a therapist. It's like, I was a pastor, I was a banker, I was,
Right.
You've had a journey that has taught you everything to get you where you are too.
Right.
So,
So I think taking the time like this, Ryan, you're teaching people to slow down, to listen to things like this, to understand people at a deeper level. This is good work, right? Because we live in such a fast-paced, got to have it fast, got to have it big society. And slowing down and sharing time and space with another human being, powerful.
sure, super important.
Powerful.
I think, and again, meeting people where they're at, but then you understand, then you can build empathy.
Yeah.
If someone's super polarizing views one way or the other, it's like, I mean, I have family on both sides of the aisle, and we have friends that are just like, whoa. But I know them on a personal level, and I know why they believe that, because their upbringing and their views and their journey through life have gotten them to these conclusions, and that's fine.
Absolutely.
You can understand a little bit more.
Yep.
It's just the hard thing is when you meet people that are very polarizing views and they're very loud and they can't turn it down or listen to anyone. And if you're not in the echo chamber, get out of here. It's just hard to be around people like that because they can't ever see the perspective from the other side of like, there's other people that might not agree with this or think differently, but it doesn't mean that they don't like you as a person. They just might have a different view.
Yeah.
And it's okay to hear people out if and when necessary. Maybe not over mashed potatoes at Thanksgiving. But
We don't want them on the wall.
No,
right? We
right.
don't want them on the wall.
Yeah.
But no, we can disagree and still be in community, right?
Sure.
When I was doing that post-crisis work last Friday for this organization, one of the women around the team said, Ramona, the hate is just so loud. Mm-hmm. And I said, you're not wrong. It is. And I would stand in front of a bus for you to tell you that love will always win. Love will always win. The hate is super loud. But again, I go back to politicians aren't going to save us. You and I are going to save each other. We can disagree, and I can still love you. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, I can put my head on the pillow and think, wow, that was beautiful work that we did together.
Sure. No, I love that so much. And I'm also of that same camp where it's most people don't realize the answers to all their problems are just in the mirror. It's like you can fix so
profound.
much of your situation if you just take ownership. And yes, bad things happen to you, but like people just don't realize it. I talk to so many people that I would say it's complaining when you're talking to someone that can't fix the problem. Like if your coworker's doing something and you're bad-mouthing them to another coworker, I'm like, go to your boss. They can fix the problem.
Correct.
Or your spouse is giving you crap, but you're complaining to your parents. I'm like, go talk to your
Go
spouse.
talk to the person, right? And say,
Fix
I've
the
got a
problem.
problem, right? How can we fix it together?
Yeah.
That's another tip I think that we can learn from is using the word we rather than you. Mm-hmm. Not you're wrong, I'm right, but how can we fix this together?
Right.
Right? And showing people that commitment to say, I do want to meet you where you're at, and I want to move forward with you. And we disagree and look different and act different and believe different things, and that's okay. But we can join forces and find a better solution.
Sure. Well, and it's so interesting too. We talk about like policy and all the things going on, but a lot of the issues I feel like with the issue or the tension, it's all I feel like mostly is social issues. Not a lot of people are getting up at Thanksgiving and arguing over tax credits and
Correct.
things. It's
Correct.
social
It's
issues,
social, right?
But a lot of, like you mentioned, a lot of these social issues, they could start at the ground level with just having a conversation.
Correct.
If you have really strong opinions about immigration or sexuality or school shooting, all the things that kind of upset a lot of people, it comes down to people being approachable, being
Correct.
able to connect, being able to empathize and understand. Because I think it's a lost art. It really is. I mean, we talk with so many people in interviews where I always say like not my goal, but it's like going into a really heartfelt interview is like get them to cry. Obviously, they feel comfortable enough to be vulnerable with me, but it's like people have such a profound story or journey through life that really shape kind of their view. And you just don't know what people been through until you ask. You just got to ask, you know? So,
Absolutely. And there's always one small step that we can take today that can make a big difference tomorrow, right? But I think sometimes people feel hopeless because they feel powerless. And I don't think any of us are powerless, right? We've got a canned good in our pantry that we're probably not using that maybe a neighbor down the street who's a mom or a dad of 3 or 4 working 2 jobs, right, and can't feed the family could use, right? And so what do I have that I can share with somebody else? Maybe it's time, maybe it's space, maybe it's food, maybe it's money, whatever it is. But how can I do a simple act today that's going to make the world better tomorrow for all of us?
sure. No, I love that so much. It seems like you're really like, I would say, a giver, like someone that loves to give time, energy, resources. Was there ever someone in your early childhood or in your life that kind of taught you that way or gave you that kind of perspective that's like, I want to be more like that person?
Yeah, both ways. My parents are definitely great givers, sometimes to a fault, right? Like would give everything, right? And so that's a beautiful thing. But on the flip side of that, Ryan, I had a pastor years ago tell me, Ramona, you're one of the best givers I've ever known, but you suck at receiving. And that just, I was like, wow, because I loved my pastor and I didn't want to have her say that about me. But she said, you need to receive better because when you say, oh, you shouldn't do that for me, or, oh, I can't, I'll never forget her words, Ryan. She said, you rob me of the joy of giving. And I was like, oh, that was a pivotal moment. So I think I'm a great giver. My parents taught me well on that. And I think I've learned to be a humble receiver and to look people in the eyes and say, thank you so much. That truly touches my heart because they then have that joy of pouring into me. And I love to pour into other people, but sometimes the joy has to come this way.
Sure.
You know?
No, I love that. And for me being someone that's like, I don't like gifts. I don't like receiving. Christmas is like my least favorite because I'm like, I just want to spend time. I'd rather
Quality time is your love language.
For sure.
Okay.
For sure. And acts of service. I like giving acts of service and I like receiving quality time. That's kind of my language there. And the gifts are just so materialistic. I'm like, oh gosh, okay.
Right.
But then as I do, we do lists and have families that, hey, what do we do? You know, we get people we exchange for. And this year I'm like, I'm going to go all out. I put a list together of like 30 things that I would be okay getting.
Okay.
Like,
so you've told them.
yes.
Yes, good.
And I said, well, I know you guys want to give gifts and I never even list them. And then you guys feel bad. You go get a gift that I'm never going to use. Like, here's things that I would actually use. I will give you the opportunity to feel the happiness of sharing that with me today.
That's wonderful, right? Look at that growth, right? Because it's not your love language, but it's theirs.
Right.
So you're giving them that opportunity. You're
Right.
receiving, and that's powerful,
Sure.
right?
Sure. Well, and then, you know, you get together at Christmas, like, oh, I'm getting my gift anyway just by being with everybody. So it's like
Right.
everybody wins, you know? So
Absolutely. That's awesome.
I love it. When we say kind of the swirling negativity, it's hard to kind of see the light, right? See the happiness, see the optimistic thing at the end of the tunnel. How do you really stay, I would say, emotionally grounded while you're carrying the stories and struggles of so many other people? How do you kind of shed that at the door, but also kind of keep your emotional grounding?
Yeah, and that's a struggle, I think, for every therapist. If a therapist tells you that it's not a struggle, I don't know that I believe them because it is for all of us because we have the privilege and the pleasure to hear people's darkest times, their darkest secrets. You know, I've had people tell me many times, Ramona, I'm telling you something that I've never told another human being. So what a privilege. And at the end of the day, to be a good therapist, we can't take all that on, right? So we have to find ways to compartmentalize that. So I think for me, Ryan, it's about knowing that I'm a tool in their toolbox, but I'm not the only tool, and I'm not their solution. I'm a resource. I'm a tool. I can be a guide, a companion on the journey. But at the end of the day, it's up to them. And praying a lot. You know, I pray for my clients every day, wanting them to live their best life. And they've got to want that too. And what they decide is much different than what I can envision for them. And they're the expert in their life, not me.
I love that.
Yeah.
If someone's listening, they're trying to figure out a better way to show up for someone in their life, and they're trying to figure out how to even break the ice, so to speak, or start that conversation with a coworker, colleague, a subordinate, their spouse, whoever. What's a good way or a good piece that someone could take away, like one thing they could try to bridge that connection or start a conversation with somebody that they know they need to have a better connection and relationship with?
I love that question, Ryan. Thank you for asking that. That's beautiful. I would say really being open and authentic and say something like, I really value our relationship. And because I do, I want to show up
how you need me to show up, not how I think you need me to show up. So I don't want to make assumptions, even though we know each other well. Can you tell me, can you paint the picture for me of things that I currently do that are great for you, and give me one or two pointers where I come across and it's not helpful to you? So give me those specifics. I guess what I'm trying to say, Ryan, is I'm a simple teacher, a simple learner. I want to know concrete examples, not just fluff. I want to say, when you do this, it makes me feel this. And when you do this, it makes me feel this. So give me some concrete examples. And then I think we've got to demonstrate that we can change. Like you said, we've got to look at ourselves in the mirror and remember that our wife or our husband or our coworker said that they needed this from us. And while that might not be natural to us and our natural tendency, our natural love language, you gave your family gift ideas. That's not something that you would normally do, but you know that they want that for you. Showing them that we can change and evolve. And then that speaks love, because they're like, oh, Ryan heard me, and I know this is hard for him, and I know he's made the change on my behalf. That's beautiful.
Sure. No, I love that so much. There's so much interest around this topic. I think we could probably talk for hours and hours away from all these different things. But is there one kind of parting piece of advice or wisdom you'd like to share with people if they're kind of going through a hard time, or they're trying to, like you said, find the optimism, find the light at the end of the tunnel, and not just swirl in the abyss of negativity?
Yeah. If any of my clients were here, I think they could tell you Ramona has 3 questions that I've taught them to use that they can pull out of their back pocket at any time. And those 3 questions are this: what am I feeling? What do I need? And what can I do? So number 1, what am I feeling? There you want an emotion word. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling lonely. I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling jealous. I'm feeling guilt. I'm feeling shame. What do I need is question number 2. And there's a big difference between want and need. And so a lot of my clients will say, well, Ramona, I can identify how I feel, but I don't know what I need. And I always say to them, Ryan, that's okay. We're not going to move on until you figure it out. And only you have that answer. So it might take them a while, right? It might take them a beat in the session, or it might be something that they don't figure out till the next session or 6 months later. There's no time frame on that. But really figuring out what they need. And that's where, whether a person is spiritual or not, I think people can drop into that inner core of themselves and really get quiet and really try to listen to that gut intuition or that spiritual higher power, or however they frame that, and say, in this moment, what do I need? And then number 3, Ryan, that what can I do? That's that empowering piece, right? As a therapist, I don't ever say, what can I do for you? Because that strips them of that power. A therapist's role is to empower the client so they know that they have their answers and they can find the pathway through. So what can I do, right? The person is asking themselves. And then when they've identified that and they take that first step, there's hope. And when they have hope, they can build on that. So the 3 questions, again, are: what am I feeling? What do I need? And what can I do?
I love that. And it ends with action.
Yeah.
It ends with
That's
moving.
why I don't sit well with people who don't take action.
Sure.
You know?
I totally hear it. Yeah. And it's, I love that. And I'm an action guy as well. And I'm just like, I always say, don't bring me a problem. Like, tell me hey, the trash is overflowing. Hey, can you go take the trash out? Like, that's how my brain works, where I'm like, don't just say, like, I cut my leg and it's bleeding on the floor. I'm like, get me a bandage. I'm bleeding.
Right. Absolutely. This is what I need,
yes,
right?
Yes. So I think I love that sequence. I think people can really take something away from that, because it's identifying the negative or positive emotions.
Right. Absolutely.
And how's that impacting your day-to-day, your actions? I love that so much.
Right.
Ramona, this has been so great. We could probably talk another 2 or 3 hours on this
Absolutely,
topic. If people are listening and they want to connect with you more, where's a good place to kind of start that process, whether it's on the therapy side or even the business side as well?
For therapy, just go to the 515 Therapy website, so 515therapy.com. If people are looking for a new therapist, you can filter on our website to see who's taking new clients and by age group, whether it's an individual or a child, whether they need group therapy or individual. You can filter on all of that. And we have several clients or several therapists who are taking new clients. And I do want to put another plug right in on the rural Iowa piece. We really do want to serve rural Iowa. On the business side, if they're interested in learning more about Vistage, contact contact me at ramona.wink@vistagechair.com. Going back to if they want a speaker about mental health in the workplace, that's on the 515 Therapy side, so they can email me for that at ramona@515therapy.com.
Love it, Ramona. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm really happy we could reconnect and talk about these really important topics that I know affect all of us. So thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much, Ryan. It was great to be with you.
Awesome. Well, if you guys have made it this far in the show, you guys know what to do. Make sure to give us a big like and subscribe on YouTube. We're trying to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so make sure to do that. And follow us on social media for daily posts from all of our last 104 episodes that we've had on the show. Tune in next week on next Monday for another engaging business or personal development show. But until next time, my name is Ryan Snod. It rhymes with odd, and I'm out. Peace. Thank you so much for watching yet another episode of the Rhymes with Odd podcast. We really do appreciate your support. If you could give us a 5-star review on Apple iTunes, that makes a world of difference, guys. Also, if you're tuning in on YouTube or Spotify, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss another episode, and check us out on social media. Also, if you'd like to inquire more about our services here at Snod Media Group or learn about doing your own podcast for your own business, you can find us at snodmedia.com. We'll see you in the next episode. Peace.